Hello, and welcome to Sandland of Soundwaves. I'm Jason Jankowski, and this is week 19, day 94. And today we are reading Judges chapter 1, verses 27 through 36. But Manasseh did not drive out the people of Beth Shan, or Taanach, or Dor, or Ibleam, or Megiddo, and their surrounding settlements, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that land. When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. Nor did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites living in Gezer, but the Canaanites continued to live there among them. Neither did Zebulun drive out the Canaanites living in Kitron or Nahalol, so the Canaanites lived among them. But Zebulun did subject them to forced labor. Nor did Asher drive out those living in Akko, or Sidon, or Ahlab, or Akzib, or Helbah, or Aphek, or Rehob. The Asherites lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land because they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out those living in Beth Shemesh, or Beth Anath, but the Naphtalites too lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land, and those living in Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became forced laborers for them. The Amorites confined to the Danites to the hill country, not allowing them to come down into the plain. And the Amorites were determined also to hold out in Mount Heres Aijalonand Shaalbim. But when the power of the tribes of Joseph increased, they too were pressed into forced labor. The boundary of the Amorites was from Scorpion Pass to Sela and beyond. And now let's read and reflect on our 7 arrows. What does this passage say? What did this passage mean to its original audience? What does this passage tell us about God? What does this passage tell us about man? What does this passage demand of me? How does this passage change the way I relate to people? What does this passage prompt me to pray to God? Let's read a brief devotional about this passage from our book, The 7 Arrows. One of the most helpful ways to understand the main point of the Bible is to notice ideas that are repeated. Remember, the Bible was written before we could add bold fonts or 10 exclamation points behind important points. All the authors had were words, so they repeated the ideas they wanted to emphasize. The book of Judges opens with such repetition. The writer named a certain tribe and then said this tribe had not driven out the inhabitants of the land. In a clear act of rebellion, the Israelites decided to allow certain people to live alongside them in the land, even enlisting some of these foreigners to help them build cities. These former slaves started acting like slave masters. We don't know all the reasons they failed to drive out the people. Maybe it was too hard, or maybe they minimized, in their minds, the harm that could come if they allowed the people to stay. But what we do know is that Israel failed to obey God, and they would surely suffer the consequences. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again tomorrow.